welcome to It Smells Like Teen, the young adult panel. I am your moderator today. My name is Debra Goelz, which is Brittany Sharmantine on Wattpad, and we have four amazingly talented panelists today: Jordan, Clary, Mariana, and Rebecca. So welcome, you guys. Thanks for being here. I just want to have a little quick reminder here before we get started that if we're running a contest to win 100 coins for paid stories, and all you have to do is type "We Thrive Together" along with your Wattpad handle in the comments section over there, and we will select a winner at random, and we'll post the name of the winner in the reception chat after the close of the panel. Good luck, everyone. So let's just dive right in because we only have 30 minutes. And I will direct the first question to Jordan. And it is, why do people, even adults, enjoy reading YA?
So I think the biggest answer to that is the nostalgia of from when you were a teenager yourself. So it's nice to be able to take a break and read about the experiences you've already been through to kind of like forget about the difficulties or just the general being of an adult for just a little while. So when you go back into those YA books, you get to relax a little sometimes.
For sure. Larry?
I think Jordan's been reading my notes because I absolutely agree. It's there's a huge nostalgia factor. I mean, I don't know, I'm 35 and I'd still love to read young adult. So, reading YA kind of feels like being part of this exciting world. So you're kind of stepping back in time and reconnecting with all these really big feelings that you had when you were a teenager. And everything at that time is so brand new and so overwhelming and so huge that you kind of do believe in things like you can save the world and you kind of believe in true love and everything. But they also exist in this transitional period between children's stories and adult stories. So all those fantastical elements from when you were writing children's stories or reading them kind of seep into the young adult, but you also have the more adult narrative and the more adult prose. So you kind of have this really great middle ground when you're trying to move into adult work.
That's true. That's very true. Mariana?
Yeah, and actually following up with what Clary said, I think for a lot of people, it's about processing maybe wishes that they had, experiences they wish they had lived when they were young, now with the experience of adults, and using that lens to filter it through the young adult characters. So it's a bit like catharsis, more or less.
That is really insightful. Okay. Rebecca?
Yeah, I think just kind of like touching on what you guys have said. For me, I think when you're a teenager, you're kind of in that sweet spot between being a child and an adult. You're starting to gain independence. You're no longer treated as a child, but you still have that kind of safety and security of being able to go home and feel that kind of sense of security. And it's just about experiencing things for the first time, and that's very exciting. It's a very exciting time, and it's just, I think, for adults to go back and regain that kind of sense of freedom. It's just about finding that feeling and reconnecting with that feeling again.
Yeah, definitely an exciting time.
Yeah.
But it seems that some people look down on YA. I don't know who these people are, but apparently it happens. Clary, what do you think about that? Why do people look down on YA?
I think there's this kind of general consensus that it's kind of dumbed down literature, and that if you're an adult, you should only really read and celebrate adult stories. But then there's a lot of snobbery and gatekeeping in literature and just about anything, so people will go, oh, well, if you read The Bad Boy Snog Me in the Cafeteria, then you're kind of like intellectually lacking. But a lot of it kind of stems from the YA market being predominantly female-led in terms of readers and writers. And there's this undertone of endemic sexism that tells people, if a woman or young girl popularizes something, then it's a point of ridicule. But the fact kind of remains that YA and romance especially is so popular and diverse. And so a lot of the people that look down on it are doing so from the sexism point of view, but also they probably not read it. They're just doing it because everyone's telling them that they should look down on it. So it is very much a societal thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Mariana?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. There's this nefarious hobby that the entire world seems to have about taking a crap on anything that women and girls are interested in. So if we want to write books or if we want to read certain books, then certain other people are going to be like, that's not literary enough. It's not intellectual enough. And YA as a category in marketing, in trad and self-pub and indie and even online is fairly new. Of course, YA books were being written for centuries, but as a marketing category is fairly new. And I think that's one of the other reasons why certain people in the book world look down on it, because it doesn't have the super long history that other genres and categories have. And you hear people saying like, oh, but nobody who writes YA has won a Pulitzer, therefore like it doesn't have huge literary value. And breaking news, it does. It's about human experiences, and anything that can help us process human experiences has value.
Absolutely. Rebecca?
Yeah, I think it's more kind of, it can be delved from a plot point. I think YA tends to kind of focus on coming of age. So, you know, these characters are experiencing things for the first time and therefore they're getting it wrong. And, you know, that's the whole point of being a teenager. You do things for the first time, you get it wrong and you learn from your mistakes, which is completely fine. We've all been in that situation. But as an adult reading back on that, it might come across as frustrating. Like, why is this character doing that? Why has she just done that? Why is she not communicating? Or he? And yeah, it can be quite frustrating as an adult who gets everything right, of course.
Yes.
But you know, for me, I think that's the beauty of YA. Like, these people are experiencing and they're getting it wrong and they're going to learn from it. But I guess as an adult reading that, they might just be really frustrated and they might not be able to get over that frustration. It's just, they're just that annoyed by it. And then therefore, unfortunately, look down on it as a genre as a whole.
Yeah,
Jordan?
I agree. I agree with what everybody else says. You know, it's all of that. And like they just don't want to accept that things that are popular that women and they write that's what it like that's just a huge thing of it. It's like, oh, they just I mean, obviously all kinds of people write YA. It's not just women, like it's everyone. But I think the other part, what Rebecca said, you know, they make mistakes and it is frustrating. And when a reviewer goes and leaves a review on a young adult book saying this isn't mature enough for me, it's like, yeah, that's the point. Like, it's for like young adults. Like adults can read it, but you know, you can't do your experience as an adult and force it on a child, basically, in a book.
Yeah.
I just want to add, because you just said comments, I once had someone comment on one of my books and said, well, this is clearly written for teenagers. It's like, yeah, it's young adult.
You're like, success.
Thanks for noticing.
Oh my goodness. Okay. The third question that we have is a two-parter, and it is this. What is the difference between YA on Wattpad versus traditional publishing? And what do you think makes a successful young adult story on Wattpad? Mariana, what do you think about that?
Yes. Okay. So I will ask you for help with the question, because as I start answering the first part, I will forget the second part of it.
I'll be here all day.
So thank you so much for that. Now, please remind me of the first part.
Okay, you got it. What is the difference between YA on Wattpad versus traditional publication?
Perfect. Okay, so in my opinion, YA on Wattpad is catering very directly to the actual YA audience. So actual teenagers who are the majority of the active readers on the platform, they are there for fun. Most of them are there to read for free. So that gives them, let's say, more leeway in accepting, errors, first drafts, imperfect books with characters who are not fully developed, etc., etc. Whereas on trad, naturally, there's a whole system with so many filters in between. The expectation is that the book that is on the shelf is as perfect as it can possibly be. It has been vetted by agents, editors, marketing teams, publishing houses, etc., etc. Um, and then by default, also these books that are on bookstores are going to be consumed by people who have money to buy them. And the paying customer portion tends to skew older. Obviously, also, all the people who are in the filters in between are definitely not teenagers, they're adults. So in trad, you will find books that, like we were speaking about before, they are supposed to be with teenagers in mind, and then you will find people on Goodreads or Amazon reviewing them and saying like, "Oh, this was so juvenile because it's for young adults."
Yes.
But it's like a different mindset. It's two different segments, in my opinion. And what was the second question now?
The second one was, what makes a successful YA on Wattpad?
So a successful YA on Wattpad, I believe, is going to be a story that is relatable to readers. Like, doesn't necessarily mean that it has to always be in high school, because the majority of teenagers are in high school or middle school. You can have characters who are superheroes saving the world, but going through those larger than life first time experiences that teenagers are also going through. So it's the relatability factor, it's the accessibility of having, those stories very easily available to the Wattpad audience that I believe makes a successful book, YA on Wattpad.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Rebecca, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think YA books on Wattpad, they have a lot more freedom to be, I think, character driven as opposed to plot driven. That's not to say that YA books on Wattpad don't have plot, but I mean, for instance, my first book that I ever wrote was a YA book, and it's on Wattpad, and I have absolutely no idea what it's about. If you asked me what the plot was, I'd be a bit like, I have some characters and they do some stuff, and yeah, but I mean, people love that. As long as they connect with the characters and enjoy the characters, they will follow the characters through anything. And I think that's the good thing about Wattpad is, you can have a book that's got 99 chapters and it's just these characters getting up to things, and people will follow that and enjoy that and they'll eat that up, and that's great. Whereas I think books that are traditionally published, YA books that are traditionally published, they'll probably have more of a fixed plot, a bit of a tighter script. Like, I mean, you wouldn't get like 99 plus chapters. I mean, you might, but I don't think I see it very often. Yeah, I just think you have a bit more freedom to kind of delve into the characters, and just it's very driven by character and not as much plot. It can be, not that it is though, but it can be.
Jordan?
Going off of that too, on Wattpad, because there's younger readers and they want to read for free, but not only that, there's readers from all around the world on one place. So when it comes to writing on Wattpad, we don't have to follow the traditional, writing and plots and stuff. And so with more simple writing, then other people that, if English isn't their first language, they can easily read the English books, because I would say, obviously there's different levels of writing for everybody, but I think a lot of people just have fun with their books on Wattpad, because you don't have to be like, oh, I have to do this perfectly because I want to get it in a bookstore. Just have more freedom.
That's for sure. Okay.
I agree. I mean, everyone's kind of covered such amazing ground already. I don't even know what I can say except I agree, but I will try. So I think a lot of people. It's the accent, isn't it? But Rebecca's here. You got Rebecca's accent as well.
Yeah.
But I think in trad YA, like everyone's kind of said, you can afford to kind of meander a bit more. There's a lot more where it needs to be perfect. You can be a bit more flowery with prose. There's a huge focus on the plot, and it also in a way needs to be quite concise, because as has been said, you can't really do 99 chapters in a trad book where they're just sort of being nerds together. You kind of just have to you have to get on with the plot. It has to make sense. It has to be key. But it's, you know, they're already, your readers also already hooked. They've already kind of bought the book, so you've already hooked them really early on, and they're going to stick with that book. And if they don't, it doesn't really impact a writer. Whereas on Wattpad, as everyone said, it tends to be character driven. It's all about being relatable with the characters, so that's what makes it successful. But also being really hooky and having short chapters, and they have to have cliffhangers, because you not only have to hook in the first chapter, but you have to keep that interest, and you have to keep hooking people throughout your story so they want to keep reading. That could be with really great characters, or it could be with cliffhanger endings. So, you know, you've got these raw emotive, really dramatic stories that are really high impact in really short chapters that just keep people coming back. And that's why Wattpad is so different.
Excellent advice. Let's move on to the last question that we have. Even though a lot of adults read YA, the stories are written for and about teens. How do you address mature scenes in YA? And let's start with Rebecca.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question for me, because I do have books on Wattpad that are adult romance books that do heavily feature sex scenes. And there is a difference. I try and keep it different for when I'm writing for a young adult audience in a young adult book. I think the main difference for me is language that I use. So in a young adult book, if my characters happen to be having sex, I will use more poetic language, and I'll kind of stick to what the character is feeling and how that connection makes them feel, as opposed to like the action that's taking place. Whereas in my romance books, I might have a bit more freedom to kind of go into the nitty-gritty details, I suppose. But yeah, it's something that you definitely need to keep in mind when you're switching between genres, because, you know, there are young people reading on Wattpad. You know, there's 11, 12-year-olds on there, and they might read your book. So if you're going into the hardcore kind of sex scenes, it's a bit worrying sometimes. So just keep it in mind. But obviously, definitely, like, you know, if it's important to the plot and you feel like it moves your plot forward, then definitely include sex scenes in your YA books. I mean, teenagers do have sex; it's just normal. But not normal. Sorry, it's just kind of like something that naturally happens. But yeah, like I just be very aware that there is younger people reading your work. So yeah, just kind of keep that in mind, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan?
Yeah, so I agree. Like, I mean, everybody's gonna have like kind of their own opinion on this like situation about sex and YA, but I agree that it should, if you're putting it in, it should definitely be part of the plot. You know, like smut added into other books, you know, it can be for plot or it can be for fun, you know. But with YA, I just think like for kids, you know, it should be like a defining moment in their relationship or something, or anything, or like a plot point, something to help it move forward. And you really should not go into the details, because like that's just like what YA is. Like, of course, yeah, kids have sex. And of course, like, yeah, you should add that to your books if you feel comfortable. But I think a lot of it too, like kids ask, like you see on Wattpad, like they want smut, but they don't take into consideration a 27-year-old doesn't want to write that about 15 and 16-year-olds. Like, it's weird. Like, maybe when you're that age, it's not that weird to you, but like the older you get, you're going to be like, no, like this is so uncomfortable. That's why, like, yeah, why it's just like, even with like traditional publishing, you know, you can't throw in an explicit sex scene in a YA book. They're going to be like, take it out. Unless, like, I don't know, you're Sarah J. Maas, I guess. But that's my opinion.
Okay, Claire?
Hashtag robbed Jordan. Oh my God. I'm a big supporter of the idea. Like, I think it's actually from Jurassic Park that just because you didn't really think about whether you should. So, you know, YA like has an awful lot of adult readers and a lot of adult writers. But the thing is, in a lot of writing, people tend to read up with the ages. So you might be writing about people who are legal. They might be 16 to 18 years old, because, I mean, in the UK, 16 is the age of consent, for example. And I think it is on Wattpad too. So, yeah, you might think, well, this is fine. I could get them to take it up a notch. And as everyone said, teenagers do have sex. It isn't unrealistic in terms of that. But the people reading it might actually be sort of 13 years old and up, which is the age you can join Wattpad. And for me, I'm 35, and as Jordan said, it does feel really kind of skeevy writing graphic sex scenes for people who are like 16 and up. It just, you're not saying it doesn't happen, because, you know, we've all been that age and we all know it happens, but you also kind of feel like there's a kind of an ick factor to it. So yeah, I tend to err on the side of like a Fade to Black if I'm doing it, or focusing more on sort of making it poetic, where you don't really know that it's happened, but you kind of do because it's not graphic. And I say that as someone that's like, I write smart on Radish, which is just like completely like to the wall crazy, like everything is on show over there, you know, but I won't write it with teenagers. So, you know, yeah, I feel like, yeah, it does happen. No one's saying it doesn't happen. No one's saying it should never ever be in a book, but it's just like, consider your audience, consider who you're trying to sell this to, and consider that, you know, you're not saying to people, guys, we want you to stay virgins forever. We're just kind of saying we're much older than you and this is really weird and we don't want to write it.
Yes. Mariana, do you have something to add?
Oh boy. Okay, so dear audience, if you are going to throw tomatoes at me for what I'm going to say, please make them fresh because they're starting to get expensive. I will try to dodge them anyway. I have very, very strong feelings about this topic. In that I am firmly 100% against smut in YA books. There is absolutely no way I can be convinced otherwise. Why? As everybody else said, I'm an adult and I am not going to write descriptive sex scenes between children. Period. Ages of consent vary from country to country, and the ickiness factor doesn't really go away until people's brains are developed, which happens at 25, by the way. So I am not comfortable with the notion of writing or reading descriptive sex in YA books, whether on trad, indie, self, or on Wattpad or other platforms. I think it's very dangerous to make this kind of content, even if it's going to get you popular very fast, let's say, because everybody's looking for smut. Because you are making something accessible to children who are not yet mature enough to process it and to understand the differences between fiction and reality. They will say that they are mature enough because we all went through that. We were all teenagers. We all said we were adults already, and we were not. That's why it's called mature. That's why those stories are, you know, supposed to be tagged mature on Wattpad, because your brain should have matured already. You should already have enough experiences to understand the differences between fiction and reality and what's harmful and what isn't, so that you can read those books. That's why they are traditionally targeted for adults. So yes, I am firmly against. I understand that you know, teenagers are going to teenage, and they're going to rebel, and they're going to bow chicka bow wow. I am still not going to write about it. The end.
Okay, I love that. I love all of the opinions, and I will not throw any tomatoes at anyone right now, mostly because I don't have any tomatoes right now.
I think though too, like going off that, like people that write YA, especially like on Wattpad, if you're not comfortable writing smut, like that should be a safe place for you to write without the readers harassing you. Like too, like I think that's a big thing, Wattpad specifically, you know. Like, because they harass you no matter what. Like,
I agree. I've had readers, like, for example, on my new adult novel, you know, characters who are actually finishing college, they can be considered full adults. And my story doesn't have smut, and I will have readers like, I feel robbed. I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not taking coins out of your pocket so that you can feel robbed. If you don't like it, please go and find something more you're liking. I will.
The only time you should ever expect smut is if you're reading erotica, and you are not owed smut in anything else.
Well said. That's a good answer. Everybody should remember that for responding to comments. Okay, well, that does it for the planned questions, but we do have questions from our audience, and I think we have time for maybe a couple. So here's the first one. Do you think there's a certain theme, element, or concept that has to be present in YA to make it YA? And let's start with Jordan.
I guess it kind of depends. Like, do I think there's like 100% you need to include this? No. Like, there's probably a bunch of things that you can include, but I guess kind of in general is coming of age, you know, like that, maybe not coming of age is the right thing, but like experiencing stuff for like the first time, like those kind of
Yeah, that's coming of age.
things. Oh, good.
Yeah,
Then I was right.
that's what I was gonna say. That's the one element that YA stories have in common. Even if you're talking about high fantasy and the characters are 18 years old or 15 years old, they're all, you know, at that stage in their life where they're learning to be adults and taking those first scary steps into being their own people, maybe rebelling against, you know, their parents or the king or whatever, you know, parental figure is in the book. It's the coming of age.
It's definitely growth, whether that's, you know, as everyone said, overcoming obstacles or just emotional growth. They've got to be different people, in terms of they started out one way in the book, and by the end of the book they need to have grown in some measure to overcome whatever their obstacle was.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just like I kind of mentioned before, getting things wrong and learning from that, and like you say, just kind of becoming a better person by the end of the book because of it, because of what they've done and what they've experienced.
Okay, here's another, and this I think will be the last question. Do you think a YA novel needs to have a teen protagonist, or that all novels with teen protagonists are YA?
Not all novels with teen protagonists are YA. All YA stories have to have a teenage protagonist.
I agree.
It sounds
Yes.
very confusing, but it's a fact. Because YA is an age marketing category. So you cannot have a 50-year-old with, you know, the type of plot that you would see for a YA and classify it as YA. It would be a very maybe funny, campy adult book.
What are the protagonist ages that you generally find in YA?
That varies, like it depends from country to country, publisher to publisher, but like typically they would say like 15 to 18. Sometimes they say 15 to 21 to catch like the new adult that you don't want to really admit to. Typically below 15, that's already middle grade. Some people say that it's actually up to 13. Like there's a weird overlap between 13 and 15, but yeah, that's pretty much.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
I think we've actually run out of time, and I know there are a lot more questions that the viewers have had in the Q&A, and we didn't get to them all. So my advice is to go to the booths that the authors are having. Are any of you having booths later today? No?
I already had mine.
No.
I already have mine.
Okay. Well, find them on Wattpad, send them questions, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them for you. And I would ask you all to please stay tuned for the next panel, which is all about Wattpad books. That should be a really good one. Thank you for coming, and I hope you guys all learned a lot about the world of teen fiction.
Thank you.
Sorry?
Thank you to everyone.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And you guys check out the reception chat to see who won, or I think the winner are about to be posted for the 100 coins. And that's it. Thanks a million. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.